Good morning, everyone. So we will begin this paper discussion with question number 8 of paper number 2, which was asked this year. The question said, reforming the government delivery system through the direct benefit transfer scheme is a progressive step, but it has limitations too. So the more important thing here is also to talk about that what is being discussed over here, as in one is the government delivery system is being talked about. The other thing is direct benefit transfer scheme. And you have to talk about two things. One is while it is a progressive step, why it has limitations too. So these are 2-3 things which you need to take care of. The limited time should be kept in mind over here. Let's begin with the meaning of direct benefit transfer. Then we talk about how is it a progressive step and then the limitations part. So coming to the discussion of this aspect, we can talk about the DBT meaning first. DBT basically is a system of providing subsidies directly in the bank account of the beneficiaries. How is it different from the other kind of system? It is different in the sense that before DBT, most of the subsidies were indirect subsidies. Even now, there are many indirect subsidies. However, there are certain subsidies which are given in the form of DBT. Let's say LPG subsidies, for example. So in this case, the subsidy directly goes into bank account rather than the product traveling from the government agencies to the beneficiaries. How is it beneficiary? It is beneficiary in the sense, or you can say it is a progressive step. It's always better to use the terminology that the question paper talk about. It is a progressive step due to the following reasons. Like better targeting. The word targeting in subsidies refer to whether the benefits are reaching the correct beneficiaries or not. Why DBT is ensuring better targeting, and better than what? Better than typically the indirect subsidies. So one reason for that can be it is less vulnerable to corruption. What kind of corruption are we referring to? For example, black marketing. Black marketing is very common kind of corruption in the indirect subsidy. The direct subsidies or DBT are less vulnerable to it in the sense that it is like interbank transfers. When the money is being transferred from one bank account to the other, the chances of corruption is less, not nil by the way, but still it is leading to better targeting. The other reason for taking it as progressive step is also the facts like, by the way, in this case, you can also talk about better targeting through unique identification of beneficiaries. However, this part can be used more accurately in the limitations part, but yes, you can say that any DBT should be better targeted through unique identification of beneficiaries. Focus more on the part which we talked about here. What else can be given in progressive step? It leads to relatively limited increase in government burden. The government burden would increase in any kind of subsidy, but it will have a limited increase if it is DBT. What exactly leads to limited increase in DBT? Because in this case, if it is DBT, there are other types of costs which can be saved. Costs like administrative costs, supervision costs, Under indirect subsidy, supervision cost can be very high because the chances of corruption are relatively higher. As well as directly the government may not have to spend on transportation, storage, etc. Something which should be used with caution, because even if there is a DBT, someone may have to bear this cost, if not government. But as such, if the question is just asking on the government aspect, you can say that the other costs can also be taken care of. The other reason why it is a progressive step is also that it leads to more freedom of choice to the beneficiaries. More freedom of choice in the sense that the beneficiaries can use the amount which they get in the bank account in the way that they want to, rather than in an indirect subsidy where they are getting a particular subsidy without the freedom of choice or with limited freedom of choice. Let's talk about why, despite all these benefits, there are limitations. Most of these limitations are not on theoretical aspects. As in, theoretically, by economic theory, DBT is considered to be better, but in practical implementation, there are certain limitations that can come in. For example, lack of financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is basically measured through the number of bank accounts. And although India is doing very well on financial inclusion, and that is why this limitation may appear a little surprising to some of you, but the fact remains that we are not yet having perfect financial inclusion. By the common estimates, we know that roughly about 85% of Indian households have a bank account. The figure is impressive. However, at the same time, don't forget the remaining 15% who don't have bank accounts. They are one of the significant set of beneficiaries in DBT. So those who are not having financial inclusion, they are forming a very major part of the DBT beneficiary. So this is one of the common limitation. The second limitation can be in the form of lack of unique identification of the beneficiaries. As I told you earlier that without unique identification, the targeting may not be good, in the sense that there may be presence of fake beneficiaries. Due to the lack of unique identification, we may have the benefits going to fake beneficiaries, hence poor targeting. However, again, most of you would be thinking that don't we have Aadhaar card linked DBT? Yes, it is. And that is a good move that was taken since 2012-13 itself, that whatever DBT was taken up was linked to Aadhaar. But at the same time, the problem which India is facing now is that Aadhaar alone is not enough to have a unique identification and provision of subsidy on that basis. So when I said lack of unique identification, it may happen despite having a very good spread of Aadhaar cards. For example, through lack of the infrastructure needed for biometric authentication. Aadhaar alone is not enough. When Aadhaar based DBT is being given, there is generally biometric authentication like fingerprint authentication or the retina scan, which has become more common in certain parts of the country. But this needs a lot of infrastructure support, in the sense that we need regular electricity provision, we need regular internet connection, we need point of sale machines by chance the DBT is being given in certain kind of subsidy. We also need smartphones, etc., access to the smartphones. And you may have read in newspapers also that due to lack of these infrastructure, many a times even if DBT is linked to Aadhaar, it is difficult to provide them. And this is what we call a genuine limitation again. Just a couple of other limitations you can talk about and use your time according to the available word limit, etc. DBT so far is not adjusted for inflation. Possibly in future, this kind of change can be made. But any DBT right now in our country is not adjusted for inflation. So what happens due to that? Due to this particular feature, the beneficiaries of DBT is not going to get the same benefit in real terms if the price of the products are increasing. So it's like, as we'll do in another question of paper 3, which was on PDS, the DBT in PDS may mean that the food grains need to be purchased from market and then the amount will be given in the bank account. But the problem is with food inflation, the DBT may not be enough to purchase the same amount of grain again and again. So these are some of the limitations that you can talk about in this case. It was not a very, very detailed question, as in this is more than enough material that is with you. If you elaborate a little, you will be getting a very well structured answer. And definitely you can give more example, you can add examples from PDS, you can add examples from other DBTs, etc., to give both the benefits as well as the limitations. So I think this was one of the simpler questions which was for the students of this institute easier because it was largely done in class by me.
So guys, let us discuss this question from GS Paper 2, Mains 2022. The question says, besides the welfare schemes, India needs depth management of inflation and unemployment to serve the poor and the underprivileged section of the society. Discuss. This we had to answer in 250 words. What is the question saying? The question is saying that in India, we observe poverty and we observe a section of the society which is underprivileged. Whenever we use the word poverty and underprivileged, we are trying to say that this section of the society is deprived of some basic necessities of life. So when you have a section of a society which is not able to get even the basic necessities of life, how do you take care of that population? You take care of that population through welfare schemes. This is the traditional method of taking care of poor and underprivileged section of the society. But UPSC is saying that just giving welfare schemes is not good enough. Because if you look at the way the economy and the society is evolving, we are facing some new challenges which needs some innovative approach to be taken care of. For example, we see that as the population of India is growing, we are observing a unique scenario where overall GDP is increasing, but employment is not increasing in that proportion. Big problem. Whenever there is huge unemployment in a society, income inequality increases. And there is dissatisfaction in the society. It leads to chaos. Similarly, we observe that there is huge inflation in the society. Things have become very costly. So on one hand, if you have poor section of the society and underprivileged, their income is low. On the other hand, prices of basic necessities of life is increasing. Food is becoming costly. Health is becoming costly. Just giving them welfare schemes will not help them to beat inflation. So UPSC is saying that if there is a country like India, which has poor and underprivileged section, just using welfare schemes is not good enough. We also need a scheme or a policy which will take care of unemployment and inflation along with welfare schemes. This is the question. How to answer this question? To answer this question, I have created this structure which will help you to understand the right areas where you have to focus in this question. Let's have a look at it, please. So this is India, right? See, this is India. UPSC is saying that India has a lot of poverty and underprivileged section. So still we face poverty and underprivileged section. And you very well know that the figures of poverty for India was calculated by Professor Tendulkar Committee report. So there is a section which is poor and underprivileged in India, and UPSC wants us to focus that only welfare schemes will not help in the upliftment of poor and the underprivileged section. We also need to provide them policies to generate more employment and policies to control inflation. So let us examine it in detail. So we have poor and underprivileged section. So let us look at the issues that they are facing. So the poor and the underprivileged section of the society, they are facing issues like basic needs. So if you are poor and underprivileged, the first problem that happens with you is you are unable to access the basic necessities of life like food, clothing, shelter, medicine, education, water, electricity. These are the things which you are unable to access. The second big problem that happens with you is lack of social security. For example, you do not have insurance cover. Sometimes you need money for old age, etc. So that cash is not available. Similarly, your bank account does not have sufficient balance. So these are the problems, and all of a sudden some requirement is there. Like in COVID lockdown, you did not have a job, etc. and you needed cash for health reason, food, etc. That is missing. Social security is missing. The third problem that happens in a country with a lot of poverty and underprivileged section is, so first is basic needs, second is social security, third is related to unemployment. Look at Indian scenario. We have a huge population. There is lack of skill. There is lack of vocational training. Because of that, there are two problems. One, we don't have sufficient employment. And second, even if we are opening more industries, but our population does not have the right skill and the capability to be employed. So employability is a problem. Close to 50% of our Indian population does not have the required skill to be absorbed in the industries. So labor force absorption becomes a challenge. These are some of the big, deeper problems that happen whenever a society is poor. So basic necessities not available, social security not sufficient, unemployment, big problem. What has Government of India done over a period of time to solve these problems? Let's see. So if you look at the Constitution of India, the directive principle of state policy and the preamble of the Constitution, they guarantee that India is a welfare state and we promote the idea of social justice. So we want to make sure that we promote those kind of policies which helps in the upliftment of the poor, and we also want to make sure that we take care of all the basic necessities of life of the entire section of the population. So welfare and social justice. To promote the idea of welfare and social justice, the Government of India started many welfare schemes. Government of India has been given a lot of subsidies. Government of India, for example, to take care of poverty, malnutrition and hunger, Government of India started National Food Security Act, where government gives food grain to the population. Then Government of India during COVID started Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, where we are giving free food grain, additional food grain to the required section of the society. Government of India is also giving loan relief, for example, to the farmers. Government of India is giving free LPG. We are having schemes called as direct benefit transfers, where subsidies are directly transferred in the accounts of the targeted population. Government of India is also giving insurance schemes for the poor. We have new schemes in the field of health called as Ayushman Bharat, etc. So there are so many welfare schemes which the Government of India has started to take care of food and other requirements of the society. For the sake of employment generation, the Government of India has been promoting MSMEs in India, because MSMEs have huge potential. Micro, small and medium enterprises have huge potential to create employment. Government of India is also promoting schemes like Manrega, because especially during COVID, what was observed that when industries and factories were not running, so those workers who are working in real estate, industries, factories, they enrolled in Manrega. Manrega gives livelihood support to people. So through Manrega, we try to tackle both employment and poverty. So Manrega scheme is run by Government of India. These are the things which we are already doing. UPSC is saying that are these things good enough to take care of poor and underprivileged? Let us examine. In India, we observe that there are some problems like disguised unemployment. For example, if I am a farmer and I have a small cropping field, 86% of the farmers in India are small and marginal, which means their cropping pattern is such that they have very small plot of land. They are not rich. So in my agricultural field, I have a small field. Only suppose one farmer is good enough for the cultivation in that field. But in India, entire family of the farmer is engaged in the same field. So requirement is of one farmer, 20 farmers are working. This is called as disguised unemployment. We have not been able to take care of disguised unemployment. And second problem is employability. We have not been able to give right skill and vocational training to the people of India so that they can be absorbed in industries. We have a new scheme in India called Production Linked Incentive Scheme, where Government of India is giving subsidies to industries to produce more and export. But Production Linked Incentive Scheme has not been connected with employment. It has not been integrated with employment generation. So that we can write in this answer that Government of India needs to do little more, and Government of India needs to link Production Linked Incentive Scheme with employment generation also. Then we have some sunrise sectors in India like food processing industry. Because of land availability, because of delays in permission from the government, the food processing industry has not taken that shape which it should have. Because food processing industry has a lot of potential to absorb workers. It can give a lot of employment. Unfortunately, we have not been able to provide too much employment using food processing industry because of land acquisition problems, because of budget, funding related issues. This needs to be promoted. Sunrise industries means those industries which have huge potential, but the potential has not been achieved. These things we need to do in the field of employment. So this we can write in the answer. That in the field of employment, the Government of India has definitely promoted MSMEs and Manrega, but more needs to be done in MSMEs because, during demonetization, during GST 2016 and 2017 and during COVID, MSMEs were badly affected. So we need to revive our MSME sector. So we can say that yes, Constitution gives a guarantee that we are a welfare state and we have to promote the idea of social justice. So then we can examine that there are some issues which are faced by the poor and the underprivileged section of the society, like basic needs are missing, social security insufficient, unemployment is a problem. And to control all these things, Government of India had started these welfare schemes. And then we can say that in the field of employment also, government has started these two, but more can be done. And then the next part of the answer, we can discuss about inflation, which is a bigger problem these days. Now let's have a look at it. The next part of the answer. So after discussing all these things, in this answer we can write that India is a country which has a lot of poverty. Our absolute poverty is very high because our population is high. So even 10% of India's population is more than 10 crore. So even if we say that today the poverty level is example 10%, our population is 145 crore. So 10% of 145 crore is 14 crore. So we have 14 crore absolute poor, 14 crore people who are extremely poor. So poverty level is very high in India, unemployment is high, and marginalized and vulnerable section are there. So scheduled caste, scheduled tribes and other marginalized sections. These three are present in India. How do we know that poverty, marginalized section, unemployment is a big problem? Look at this. According to an index called as Global Hunger Index, India's rank is 101 out of 116 countries, which means in India, people are still dying because of lack of food and nutrition. Who dies because of lack of food and nutrition? People who are poor, people who do not have jobs, and people who are marginalized and vulnerable. It clearly shows that these three are a big problem. Look at the rank of India in the Global Hunger Index. Similarly, if we look at Multidimensional Poverty Index, which was calculated by Niti Aayog, recently they released a report in the year 2021, Multidimensional Poverty Index. The same index is used in United Nations also. According to that, more than 50% population of Bihar is poor. Around 42% of population of Jharkhand is poor, around 37% population of UP is poor. This is the level of poverty. When you look at the level of poverty, we realize something, and look at the level of malnutrition and hunger, we realize that these people who are poor, who are not able to buy food, for them, even 10 rupees is a big amount. Even this is a big amount. So suppose we are talking about people who are poor. Suppose we take an example of a person who has 100 rupees. Suppose there is a person who is poor and the poor person has 100 rupees. With this 100 rupees, a poor person is able to buy one packet of bread, one packet of milk and medicine. These three things. Suppose there is inflation in the economy. Price of everything goes up. Now, if I am a poor person using 100 rupees, I cannot buy food, I cannot buy bread, milk and medicine. I'll have to compromise on something. If using 100 rupees, I am buying one packet of milk, one packet of bread and one medicine. So if price of everything rises, either I will not buy medicine or I will not buy milk or I will not buy bread. Compromise has to start. I am anyway so poor that I am just surviving in the society. And if prices rise, I won't be able to even survive. I won't be able to give food to my children and to my family. If I fall sick, my children fall sick, I won't be able to take them to hospital. So inflation creates a deeper impact on poor. It creates less impact on rich. It creates more impact on poor. Inflation creates more impact on wage earners. Those people who are salaried, they are affected the most. Inflation creates more impact on vulnerable and marginalized section of the society. So guys, imagine that I am rich, I am at this level, and somebody is poor at this level. When inflation comes, the rich remains the rich, the poor becomes poorer, because the real value of money comes down. So if I have 100 crore rupees in my account, if inflation comes, I still remain rich. But if I have only 10 rupees in my account, if inflation comes, I will have to compromise on either food or medicine. So inflation creates different impact on different sections of the society. So whenever inflation comes, people say that inflation is like a tax on the poor, because inflation hurts the poor the most. Whenever inflation happens, the gap between the rich and the poor goes up. The rich remains the rich, poor becomes poorer. So inflation hurts the poor the most, inflation hurts the salaried people the most, and the inequality in the society goes up. So since India has a lot of poverty, India has vulnerable section also. So only taking help of welfare schemes is not good enough. We need to provide employment, and we also need to take care of inflation, because inflation hurts the poor and the wage earners most. There is a theory in economics which is called as Phillips curve. Phillips curve says that there is inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. What is the meaning of Phillips curve? That a little inflation is good for the economy. So for example, if prices are rising by 2%, the society can tolerate it. But beyond a point, if prices rise, it hurts the society. If prices are rising little bit, society can manage with it. And little bit rise in price gives incentive to the producers. The producers will increase the output, they will give more employment. But if prices rise beyond a limit, then it hurts the society, because everything becomes costly. The rich can manage. The high income group of the society can manage. But people who are low income group and people who are wage earners, whenever the price rises, they are hurt the most. So if we use these arguments in the exam, that there is a lot of poverty, unemployment in India, and how do we know? Look at the global hunger index, multidimensional poverty index. If we look at these figures, we come to know that India has huge section of poor and malnourished. And when things become costly, their survival becomes problem. So we need a policy in India to take control of basic needs of the society. So how do we control? So look at this question, guys. So this question says that besides welfare schemes, we need a policy for inflation and unemployment. So yes, our poor and underprivileged section of the society, they are facing issues related to basic needs, social security, unemployment and inflation. We already have huge number of schemes to take care of basic needs and social security. These schemes are already working. And Government of India has to design the schemes, because it is mentioned in the Constitution that we are a welfare state and we have to promote social justice. But Government of India needs to do little more to promote employment and to control inflation. These two have not been taken care in India. So we need more active participation from government to create more employment and skill, promote MSMEs. And there is a scheme in India called as Make in India. Even the Make in India scheme has not been able to generate a lot of employment because the sectors covered under Make in India, their employment potential is low. For example, if you put defense industry in Make in India, defense is required for India, but it won't create too much of employment. So under Make in India, we need to put those industries which also promote employment. So unemployment has to be taken care of, and inflation has been majorly ignored in India. We need to take care of inflation, especially to protect the poor and the vulnerable section. This is what we have to write in this answer. Thank you.